Well, and it's really interesting for a state like Wisconsin because we are very provincial and we value our rugged independence. We're farmers, we're mechanics, we're people who are just interested in getting stuff done, and we'll do it ourselves if we need to. And putting groups together to do something bigger goes a little bit against our DNA. So we've done a really good job in the past decade, as you say, of building up that muscle.
That voice was Buckley Brinkman of the Wisconsin Center for Manufacturing and Productivity, talking about the importance of stakeholders in Wisconsin and every American region to work better together, strengthening our collective impact muscles. His interview coming up next on the podcast Manufacturing an American Century.
Welcome, Americans. You're listening to the podcast Manufacturing an American Century with your host, Matt Bogoshian.
Welcome to this episode of the podcast Manufacturing an American Century. Today, we are lucky enough to have with us Buckley Brinkman, Executive Director and CEO of the Wisconsin Center for Manufacturing and Productivity in the great state of Wisconsin. Welcome, Buckley.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Good to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for being on the podcast. Now, we've known each other for many years. In the past, you were president and COO of a manufacturer that you helped turn around. Then you got into the business of helping other manufacturers become more competitive. How and why did you make that transition, Buckley?
Well, manufacturing's always been key to me. I've never figured out how an economy works without a vibrant manufacturing base. So I remember when I graduated years ago, we were in the middle of the first takeover of the auto industry by the Japanese. And the people who graduated with me said, well, you don't have to worry about manufacturing. We're going to become a service economy or a technology economy. And reply back to me, you realize, of course, that one out of every five computers goes into a car. And they didn't really have an answer for that. And I think, through the pandemic now, we've shown just how important a manufacturing base is. So I was a manufacturing turnaround guy for the first 25 years of my career, and then joined the MEP National Network 12 years ago. So it's been a great ride on both sides.
Yeah. Well, I'm asking that question because we need a lot more people like you helping to strengthen manufacturers and the ecosystem of support they need to thrive. And, it looks like you're getting the message out in Wisconsin. I saw you were recently featured as a newsmaker on Wisconsin public television talking about the state of the economy there. I mean, there's a lot to digest, right, to help manufacturers and if folks in any region in the country, care about their community, you have to care about your manufacturers. We need to make smarter products that solve problems. We need to provide shortcuts for regional leaders like you to stay informed and help others. How do you keep up, with all of the, stream of information that matters to strengthening manufacturing? Because it seems overwhelming, I think, to a lot of folks to say, look, I want to have some agency. I want to make things better, but I'm only, live in my little perch, in my organization or whatever. What's your take on that? Yeah.
Well, I think what's really important is that you're constantly not trying to invent the wheel. Number one, it's interesting. I'm sure you've had the same experience when you get into a discussion about workforce, and a newbie comes into the discussion, and they're saying, "Oh my God, we have a problem, and we should be going younger in the schools, and we should be engaging more industry, and we should have coalitions." And you say, just sit down there. It's okay. You can catch up here. But I think it's important finding those people who are doing really interesting things, and then having some sort of a personal framework on what the key drivers are of the industry right now. And far and away above any other driver is just the worker shortage.
Hmm.
We are here in Wisconsin right now, we are 150,000 workers short. If we allocated everyone perfectly, we only have 74,000 people who are unemployed right now. And it's just very, very difficult to find new people. And I think I know that's driving investments in technology, and it's changing the entire manufacturing landscape. So having two or three trends that you're watching and staying on top of and getting down to the basic data really help you put together a more comprehensive picture of where manufacturing is and where it can go.
Yeah, and you're talking about a couple of important pieces of the ecosystem, we call it, for manufacturers. We call it the Big Six. If you go to the AMCC website, americanmcc.org, you can see a description of the Big Six. Two of those you just mentioned there is workforce and what we call operational improvement, but that includes automation, right? Because we have to get things done. We need to make smarter products that solve problems. And, just a couple of months ago, you were a featured speaker at the Smart Manufacturing and Automation Summit in Chicago, talking about automation. You described the challenge on workforce, and we need to, dig deep and provide as many opportunities to diverse populations wherever we are. So that's a key piece of helping to solve the workforce problem. But automation is important too on workforce, but also on making smarter products that solve problems. So tell us about what you talked about there on automation and how you see that fitting into the equation. Yeah.
Well, we do a report every year, the Wisconsin Manufacturing Report, where we have most of those are surveys where you go out and say, "Hey, Matt, will you go on my website and fill out this survey form?" And then people compile a couple hundred of those and come up with some conclusions. Well, we do this a little differently. We have 420-minute interviews with C-level manufacturers across the state. And then we follow that up with 5 focus groups. And one of the really interesting things we took out of last year's survey was that this worker shortage is changing the face of manufacturing. Normally you're talking about, do I put workers against an issue or do I put capital against an issue? What's happening now, what we found in our study was that the larger manufacturers are having a tougher time finding employees than smaller manufacturers. And they have the wherewithal and the expertise to really lean into automation and advanced technology, smart manufacturing. And they're doing it. And they've gotten the expected impacts, which is they've gotten more throughput and their costs have gone down. But they've also discovered something else, that their quality went up and they're understanding the advantage of controlling their own production schedule. So now, Matt, if you're a supplier to me and I can produce something at the same price that you have and I control the schedule and I control the cost, you don't stand a chance anymore. So manufacturers are not only at risk for changes in the marketplace, which has been the traditional place where these threats have come from, but now you're in danger with your customers because they're able to integrate back down the supply chain, bring that in-house, and make their operations better, more efficient, and more resilient.
So, Buckley, say a little bit about the playing field in Wisconsin, right? So, we have across the country, upwards near 300,000 manufacturers across the
Right.
country, and most of them are small and medium-sized manufacturers. And you were just
Over
speaking,
98%.
speaking to that point, and you from past surveys, we've learned that most of them are not very automated, I should say, with digital equipment and other cutting edge technologies. And that's one of our big 6, right? Is how operational improvement. Talk a little bit more, for other regional leaders about kind of the playing field in Wisconsin and how you guys are trying to help your small and medium-sized manufacturers improve their operations with these newer tools and tactics? Yeah.
Well, we saw this. Well, first of all, Wisconsin is one of the leading manufacturing states in the country. If you measure us in terms of percent of GDP, we're one of two states where manufacturing is the largest sector in that. We have the highest concentration of workers in manufacturing in the country. You know, we're always swapping places with Indiana. Right now, we're number one. Sometimes they're number one. So manufacturing is really a key part of the Wisconsin economy. And what we do is where we're strongest is providing components to other manufacturers. Sure, there are some brand names coming out of Wisconsin, you know, Harley Davidson, Johnson Controls, but by and large, we're supplying the components to other people's equipment. And what we've seen, we saw the worker shortage coming 6 or 7 years ago, and we knew there was that our state technical college system does a terrific job on the skills side of the equation. We knew we weren't going to do much to impact immigration policy, so that pretty much left productivity. So we set out to improve the productivity of individual manufacturers by 30% or more. And we've done that. We've figured out how to do that. And we've also learned two things along the way. One is that every manufacturer goes through a predictable maturity curve. You know, for if you're going in and applying technology and you don't understand your basic operations, if you haven't done the process flows and your continuous improvement baselines, then if you jump to technology too early, you'll do one of two things. You implement the wrong technology in the wrong place in the wrong way, or you'll automate something that should have never been done in the first place. So you got to get that base in place. And we think that's 50% of the manufacturers out there. They really have a lot of juice left in that continuous improvement squeeze. The second level now is when you've gotten that baseline in place, now you're ready to apply discrete technologies, you know, automating a production line, building a configurator for the front end of your order entry, going paperless on the floor, things that are just technology in one place that now you know you can how to apply it and you know the return you're going to get from it. And that'll boost you up to industry best practice. We think that's about 35% of the manufacturers out there. And then that last group is that advanced wedge, where you're talking about that final 15% of manufacturers that are really pushing the frontier. And that's where you start connecting technology. You start using all the industry 4.0 and smart manufacturing tools and figuring out how they all come together in a way that really pushes you into the stratosphere. So that's one, it's just this maturity cycle. The second thing is that there may be 100 solutions in the portfolio, 100 technology solutions in the portfolio, but the three that work for Matt probably aren't the same three that work for me, are probably not the same three that work for the manufacturer down the street. So it really ends up being a very custom process. If you want to get 5% productivity improvement, have a program. You know, you'll get 10, I'll get 1, somebody else will get 4. We'll average out to 5%. If you want 30%, you're really talking about going door to door and figuring this out, manufacturer by manufacturer. And that's what we're doing here. We're implementing that manufacturer by manufacturer and having an impact now on how our manufacturers can compete on the world stage.
Yeah, and so you mentioned at the outset, Buckley, about this manufacturing extension partnership program. So that's been an example, long-time example of a federal intervention where there's one in every state in Puerto Rico that is, set up to help these manufacturers, improve their process. Now, admittedly, these MEPs, for short, manufacturing extension partnerships, they can't get to all of the manufacturers that are out there. This is a huge, transition that we're making in manufacturing right now. Plus, we have this onset of this new industrial policy in the United States, where we have a whole slew of federal interventions that we didn't have before to try to spur accelerated progress on this front, but a lot of other related fronts for the manufacturing ecosystem. How do you look at all of these, incoming intervention opportunities and try to herd your cats? Not that you lead everything; it's just you're a key stakeholder within that ecosystem. And how do you navigate that? How should other regions, navigate, that, from what you've learned?
Yeah, I mean, as you know from your experience, Matt, these MEP centers really form the backbone of the national capability to reach small and medium manufacturers. One of the things that we've traditionally had trouble doing is we've been very locally focused. I work on what's important here in Wisconsin, keep my head down and not worry about what's going on elsewhere. And what we've really done over the course of the past 4 or 5 years is start to look more outward. So we've created new communication channels, we've created new models of cooperation, and so the MEP is now a much stronger skeletal structure that other people can build on. I think what's interesting about the initiatives, the government interventions here, is just they're circulating around three main targets right now. One is workforce, one supply chain, and the third is around technology. And those are. It's nice to have those labels, but it doesn't provide enough focus to really get the heat, light, and energy that you need around some of these topics. And then you lay in on top some of the regional focus, regional investment on economic development. Whether it's the technology hubs that were partially funded through the CHIPS Act, or the NSF innovation engines that are coming out. It's been very interesting to watch the participants in these all of a sudden realize, oh my gosh, this is not just going to be another university-led way to fund more research. Because in each one of these cases, the sponsor has said manufacturing has to be a key part of this.
Yeah.
Because it's really something that when you look at communities that are struggling, that's the piece of the equation that's been missing. It's great that we're generating technology. It's the capital is based in 5 areas on the coast, and for those of us in the Midwest, you have to have something that really is driving your piece of the economy. And I think the pandemic really helped us in a couple of ways. One, the shortages, especially around PPE during the pandemic and microprocessors coming out of the pandemic, have really shown us, you can't just go to the low cost producers somewhere in the world and hope that things will be all right while you save a little money.
Yeah, that's
So
not going to work.
it's really emphasized how important manufacturing is. And then the second piece is it's really made a lot of us much more comfortable with new technology. I mean, we're recording this podcast, but you and I can see each other too. 4 years ago, we wouldn't have thought of doing that. And so now, we very quickly become very facile at integrating new technology and figuring out how to do it in our personal lives, and understanding how important that is for our professional lives as well.
Hey, so tell us, so you're talking about all these different interventions. So appreciate you calling those out from these different federal agencies around the 3 areas you talked about. how is Wisconsin in particular organizing itself to take advantage of these interventions? Every state and region seems to be different, is what I'm getting
Right.
at. So I'm just curious about how you guys are doing it, and no one's got it dialed. I should say that at the
Right.
outset.
Right.
But what's the cocktail of leadership and stakeholders that you've put together there in Wisconsin? Yeah.
Well, I think it's really interesting to talk to the people who are the sponsors of these initiatives, and they haven't figured it out yet. You know, the NOFOs are out, the the opportunities are out on the street, and there's some frameworks, but when you get down from 10,000 feet down to the hard deck, a lot of the people running the show don't know what they're looking for yet. They've got an idea, but the specifics are still a little bit up in the air. And there's some ideals, and I think there's a lot of work right now on uh, identifying what it is that's going to be most helpful. I see a lot more work going into these investments than in past opportunities. So there's a real effort to understand what's going to be helpful and what's going to work, rather than just, pushing grants out the door. For us here in Wisconsin, it's really an interesting challenge because for the people who are going to have those transformational ideas that we want to see implemented, those are probably the people you wouldn't trust with $100 million, right? That not personally, but I mean, their organizations. They don't have the capacity to handle that volume of funding or the coordination involved, but they're going to have the great ideas. And the flip is true. The people you could say, okay, take care of this $100 and or $100 million and invest it, are also going to be the folks who are most vested in the status quo. So that's the challenge we're working with right now. We've organized a group around the tech hub, and our proposal is coming out of the ether right now. We're seeing good cooperation across the spectrum. It's the size of that makes it almost mandatory that the state is involved in some way, shape, or form, because the parties that are the monoliths can only be muscled by someone with as much brawn as they have. We also recently won an NSF Innovation Engine Planning Grant. So that's through the Water Council here in Milwaukee, and we're really excited about that, because that's a group of partners that are coming together who have worked together for a long time. And we're figuring out how to use this investment and use our secret sauce, which we think is that nexus between water and energy and manufacturing, and putting the three of those things together and coming up with something that's really going to be special.
Talk about how you in Wisconsin are part of these consortia that organize themselves for some of these interventions, and then reorganize yourself for another one, and then reorganize yourself, and the importance of the repetition and building trust with public and private stakeholders. Speak to that, because it's almost, it reminds me, Buckley, of it's like a muscle that a region needs to build, right?
Yeah,
that you
right.
just can't put together a consortia right off the bat and make it successful. That you need to take baby steps and then keep going and never quit. Yeah.
Well, and it's really interesting for a state like Wisconsin, because we are very provincial and we value our rugged independence. We're farmers, we're mechanics, we're people who are just interested in getting stuff done, and we'll do it ourselves if we need to. And putting groups together to do something bigger goes a little bit against our DNA. So we've done a really good job in the past decade, as you say, of building up that muscle. And I think what's interesting is I've really seen during my time here a shift from people who enter into these funding meetings and go, I've got the answer, just write me a check, I'll solve the problem, to now groups, I won't go into those rooms anymore. I want to go into the rooms where people are saying, okay, who's doing the best work? And how can we bring them into the group? And where that's me, I'm happy to contribute that to the effort. Where it's somebody else, I'm willing to stand to the side and figure out how I can help them be successful. But that's a very different mindset than, we still have groups in the state that come together around a grant. And the reason the people are in the room is to figure out how big a slice of pie they can get. They're not really interested in making the pie bigger. So.
Yeah. No, it takes persistence, that's for sure, and that keeps coming across, and teamwork, and all of that. You obviously like doing this work, and you've been doing it for a while. Personally, what do you find most rewarding about this? Yeah.
Well, I grew up here in Wisconsin. I went away for 30 years and then came back. So it's a blast, working on manufacturing in a way that's more that affects all the manufacturers in Wisconsin as opposed to one, and being connected with a network across the country, which gives some really unique perspective to the work. I mean, it's a little bit of a virtuous circle when you get into the system and you learn, and then you find new doors, and then the system starts taking care of itself. I mean, you've experienced that as well as I have, as well as being able to just practically help manufacturers. We can affect the structure here, but the most rewarding is helping someone get to that next level of performance and really get on a track where they're being successful and they're the employer of choice and they're making a lot of money. I mean, we just had another presidential award winner this week for exporting. So those kinds of accomplishments are a lot of fun for me.
And that's for manufacturers successful in exporting.
Yes, it's put out by the Department of Commerce nationally. So it's a company here that if you see a police cart with a computer mounted, chances are that's a Gamber Johnson mount in that police car. And they've blown up worldwide. So it's a great company.
How many people do they employ roughly, do you think?
God, I think they're up to 400 or 500.
Yeah.
And they started with 5.
Buckley, based on your experience, what's your message to listeners across the country about, what they should do to improve their manufacturing region?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, is understanding just how important it is. I mean, I liken it to the tracks on a railroad. I mean, most railroads make their money off of the rolling stock, the box cars and the hopper cars and the tankers. They might make a little money off the engines, but if you don't have the tracks, none of those work. And there's not you're not going to make the most money from those railroad tracks, but you have to have them to make the trains run. And that's the same with manufacturing. I mean, we're seeing that now with the CHIPS Act and the understanding that you better have manufacturing close by so that you can do that development loop from the lab to the factory and figure out what works and what doesn't work and be able to produce the pilots. So there's that important part of it. And then the other piece of it is just making sure that you're engaging the resources necessary to really holistically help manufacturers. I mean, manufacturing is a complicated profession, which is why it's a lot of fun. It involves people, it involves finance, it involves technology, it involves foreign trade. So it really pulls all of those things together in one unit. And being able to participate in that is a lot of fun. It's an honor, and it's vital to our economy.
Yep, that's for sure. And if you want to learn more about on ramps to understanding manufacturing, and you can jump on the AMCC website, AmericanMCC.org. where you'll learn from great leaders around the country, like Buckley Brinkman, Executive Director and CEO of the Wisconsin Center for Manufacturing and Productivity in the great state of Wisconsin. Thanks, Buckley.
Thank you, Matt.
You can learn more about AMCC and joining our weekly mailing list at americanmcc.org/subscribe. If you're a manufacturer, economic development professional, workforce and trading person, capital provider, or work in any field critical to American manufacturing, send us a note. We'd love to hear about progress from your part of the ecosystem and join us on our Monday calls. The next episode of this podcast, Manufacturing an American Century, will be coming out soon. So in the meantime, spread the word by sharing about AMCC and the podcast on your Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Manufacturing an American Century is available on Spotify and all major podcast platforms. Thanks for our production partners, AMCC Operations Director David Van Sicklen and Mr. Mike McCallan from Podcasting for Associations. That's it for now. I'm Matt Bogoshian with you, Manufacturing an American Century.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.